Since 1934, Iowa's farmers have turned to the Iowa Farm Bureau spokesman as their trusted news source. Now, the Spokesman Speaks. Listen in and hear from leading experts on topics important to farmers and agriculture. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our December 27th edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler, and today we'll introduce you to Iowa Farm Bureau's newly elected president, Brent Johnson of Calhoun County. And the timing for this particular conversation couldn't be any better because today, December 27th, marks the official 103rd anniversary of Iowa Farm Bureau. Back on December 27th, 1918, 72 county farm bureaus gathered in Marshalltown and unanimously voted to create the Iowa Farm Bureau Federation and then elected James R. Howard as their first president. 103 years later, we welcome Brent Johnson as the 14th president of our organization. Brent's got a fascinating background. He's a farmer and an agronomist with an extensive background in precision ag and conservation. So today, you'll hear a bit more about his background and some of the challenges he's looking forward to taking on as he begins his first term. Then, later in the episode, we'll talk with Sam Kieffer, who's the Vice President of Public Affairs for the American Farm Bureau, about a couple of the national policy issues that will remain high priorities for our organization in 2022. But we'll start with Brent Johnson, who was elected president earlier this month at Iowa Farm Bureau's annual meeting in Des Moines. Spokesman editor Dirk Steimel will take it from here.
To start off, Brent, can you give us some background on yourself and your farming operation?
Yeah, my name's Brent Johnson. I'm a fifth-generation farmer from Manson. That's in Calhoun County. I farm with my wife, Luann, our son, Matthew, and his family, and then we have a daughter, Kaylee, who's a freshman in college in ag studies.
And what kind of crops, livestock do you have, Brent?
We have corn and soybeans as our primary crops that we grow. My wife and I, we founded an independent crop consulting business in the mid-2000s where we were working with customers all over the state and surrounding areas with soil fertility, precision agriculture, data management, that arena.
Brent, what's it mean to be the 14th president of the Iowa Farm Bureau?
Yeah, to be the 14th president, chosen by our members, it's just a huge honor. I'm really blessed to have this opportunity. It's a top-notch organization, and to know that our everyday farmers chose me to lead this organization and to drive them into our next century is really humbling, and I'm really excited for the future.
There are a lot of farm groups out there, obviously. Why have you chosen to take a leadership role in Farm Bureau?
To me, Farm Bureau is the pinnacle organization. There are so many things that we do the right way. I firmly believe we have the best staff. Our policy process is the best by far. Our programs are superior. And when it comes to agriculture advocacy, this is really the place to be, and to really carry the water across all commodity groups and make an impact into local, state, and national politics. Iowa Farm Bureau is clearly the lead.
And obviously, it's a grassroots organization.
No question about it. Our strength, our foundation is certainly our members, and everything that we do starts there, and I'm proud to carry their voices forward wherever that conversation needs to happen.
What do you see as the biggest challenges facing both Farm Bureau as an organization and agriculture in general as you look today?
There's certainly a lot of challenges. Talking policy, there's no shortage of those conversations coming out of Washington, D.C. right now. Taxation and regulation are certainly top of mind when it comes to those current topics. And, one real unfortunate circumstance right now is the EPA's ruling on our WOTUS rule, the waters of the U.S., to revisit that 2015 rule and renegotiate something that really has a huge impact on every farm across the entire state is a real tragedy that we're starting from years in the rear. The WOTUS rule in 2015 was really the definition of overreach when it comes to agencies out of Washington, D.C. That rule basically gave the EPA leverage to control 97% of Iowa's land base. And we currently have a rule in place, the Navigable Waters Rule. All farmers understand what that is. It's clear, it's workable, it's usable, and to go backwards is just a real tragedy.
Farm Bureau has been a leader in water regulations. As we move into this new era, what can Farm Bureau do to help mitigate this issue?
Again, our farmer members are going to be key as we move forward. We certainly need their leadership and their voices on all levels. But, as president, I will be taking our state board of directors to Washington, D.C. in February, and we're going to be meeting with the EPA. I was just there a couple weeks ago and met with all of our representatives and senators and asked each and every one of them to help us open the door to the EPA so that we can have those conversations and make sure that farmers' voices are heard clearly within Washington, D.C.
You've been a pioneer in precision agriculture and founded, as you noted, a crop consulting business that worked with farmers from all over Iowa to help them utilize cutting-edge technology to advance profitability, soil health, data management, all of those things. Why is precision technologies, why are they so important for agriculture and farmers today?
Precision ag, for me, really hits two things really strongly. Number one, implementing that and using those tools really has a strong impact on your return on investment. So being more efficient with seed, with fertilizer, with all the inputs, recording all your data, understanding the measurement and the benchmarks that you can define and make progress in really helps individual farmers make those business decisions. The second approach where precision ag really helps is in all of our current environmental conversations. So not only are we efficient with our inputs, but we're also accurate when it comes to our environmental impact. So placing the right seed, the right amount of fertilizer, the proper chemicals, and measuring that output does make an impact on the environment. And by implementing precision agriculture, we are doing a better job of being stewards and recording those results moving forward.
Tell us about the practices you use on your farm in conservation and how you measure those. How do you measure their effectiveness?
Conservation practices on my farm, as far as tillage goes, we do implement strip tillage and no tillage, so preserving our soil quality, proper water infiltration, those practices really help in those conversations. We've also implemented cover crops and trying to keep wind erosion as well as water erosion in check so that we can do a better job of taking care of our precious resources, the soil and the water, so that my kids, my grandkids have the same opportunities or hopefully better opportunities than I've had.
Do you see this as you travel around Iowa and talk to people? Do you see conservation as really catching on?
Yeah, it really has. The last several years, it seems like if you travel gravel roads over the last couple years, you're starting to see some more green fields in the wintertime. Those are all the cover crops that are growing. We can always do better, but absolutely we are making progress. We're making progress every year. Some of the committees that I've served on in the past with NRCS, we see those numbers coming through. So we are doing better. We are improving our water quality in Iowa as well.
And as president, do you see that as a focus for you?
Well, it certainly plays into the strengths that I've had in my personal life. I've held my CCA license for over 23 years now, built a successful crop consulting business. So the entire agronomic conversation is a comfortable place for me to be. And I think there's opportunities within Farm Bureau, within our policy, within our programs that we can help educate our members and certainly move that needle even further.
What does agricultural sustainability mean to you, Brent?
Well, sustainability to me is essentially maintaining the land and the water and all of our resources in a way that benefits not only our future generations, but our current circumstances as well. So taking care of the environment is certainly key right now, top of mind, and giving those opportunities so that we can continue to increase our production with, at the same time, less inputs so that we can be more profitable, we can be more sustainable, and more environmentally friendly moving forward.
One last thing, as you begin your presidency, tell us about your vision for Farm Bureau.
As I've said, this organization does so many things the right way. The way that I run my life, I'm never satisfied with the status quo. Even though we're the best at many different things, what's one aspect that we can do just a little bit better? Just ratchet forward just a little bit and further distance ourselves from second place even further. And, one example of that I've shared with many of our members is ag in the classroom is certainly one of those areas. It's very appropriate that we're talking to third and fourth grade kids in our current situation. What are our opportunities with 4-H and FFA and PAS and getting those kids that have made an active choice that agriculture is a part of their future, that they understand what Ag in the Classroom is, who Farm Bureau is, where they can turn to for answers. And in a handshake with that conversation, we understand where those kids have gone to, who their circles of influence have become so that we can get them involved in the Young Farmer Program and set on boards across the entire state so that we can continue to navigate tomorrow's challenges.
Congratulations to President Johnson. He hit the ground running, and we're excited to see where his leadership takes this organization over the next few months. Next up, as promised, is Sam Kieffer, the Vice President of Public Affairs for the American Farm Bureau. Sam was a featured speaker at Iowa Farm Bureau's annual meeting earlier this month, and afterwards, spokesman editor Dirk Steimel caught up with him to discuss some of the national policy issues that will be top of mind for Iowa's farmers and ag professionals in 2022.
We're here with Sam Kieffer, Vice President of Public Affairs for American Farm Bureau. Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Farm Bureau.
At the end of the day, I'm just a farm kid from Pennsylvania. Grew up in a small farm in the center part of the state, and my father and brother still farm there. I show up on weekends and break equipment from time to time, and they shoo me away. My role at American Farm Bureau is Vice President of Public Affairs, and in that capacity, I lead our team of lobbyists, our team of economists and grassroots engagement and advocacy folks as we provide the voice for American farmers and ranchers to members of the United States House and Senate and throughout agencies within the administration in Washington, D.C.
There are a lot of big issues coming for agriculture now and in 2022. Let's talk about a few of them. We've talked a lot about taxes. Do you feel comfortable that the estate tax and stepped-up basis are protected?
There's still a whole lot that we don't know. But what I will say is the voice that farmers and ranchers from across the country raised throughout the course of the last year in admonishing members of Congress and admonishing officials from the administration to leave both the federal state tax alone as well as not to touch the capital gains tax or eliminate the step-up in basis on the capital gains tax. That message was heard loud and clear. And we still don't know what some of the provisions are going to look like in the majority party's Build Back Better Act. But right now, which is possibly near the end of its process, right now there are no changes to either the federal estate tax or the capital gains tax or stepped-up basis in that document. A lot can change, but Washington, D.C. heard farmers and ranchers loud and clear so far.
And farmers made a difference?
Farmers made a difference. Farmers moved the needle, and farmers, through telling their stories and engaging with their elected officials and appointed officials, and talking with friends and neighbors, and talking to the media, and explaining how what has been characterized as a tax on the rich really could have a negative impact on farms and the ability to transfer, the farm from one generation to another. That's what made the difference.
Another big issue for farmers is water rules. that they've changed a lot and they appear to be changing again. Where are we with the water rules, and how is Farm Bureau involved in that?
As you mentioned, water rules have changed. This is now the third administration in a row that has attempted to change how the Clean Water Act is implemented and enforced across the country. It started with the Obama administration, who put in place a rule with sweeping changes that would have had a devastating impact on farmers and ranchers by requiring a federal permit, in our opinion, to do a lot of things that farmers do on a normal daily basis. And that was a bridge too far. We fought back on that, and were able to work with the elected officials to push back and change that. The Trump administration went the opposite direction, put in place a rule that we thought was workable. And our main priority with that administration was to find a rule where farmers and ranchers literally had guidance and a checklist that they could walk their fields or drive the farm and see, a land feature, whether it be ephemeral stream, grass waterway, a ditch, and say, this does or does not qualify as something that the EPA or the Army Corps wants to regulate. 2 days before Thanksgiving, the current administration publicized their rule, the proposed rule, which would repeal the Navigable Waters Protection Rule, which we supported, and attempt to replace it. And Administrator Regan indicated that his efforts would be to find some common ground, find a rule that would stop the ping-pong match of water regulation from one administration to the next. And we think that while it's a slightly better provision than was put forth by the Obama administration, it's still a far cry from what Administrator Regan was promising in providing clear guidance and a rule that farmers could support.
So where do we go from here?
This is the beginning of a process. The beginning of the process in a rulemaking. And rulemakings are long, but we expect that when this is published in the Federal Register that we'll have until February to provide some comments, some very detailed scientific and legal comments to the agencies about where we have disagreements. One of those disagreements is they want to bring back the significant Nexus test. And what that test would do is it would once again give a federal employee, whether they be the Army Corps or the EPA, the ability to come out onto the farm and single-handedly make a determination if that land feature should be federally regulated. What we're coming from with the Navigable Waters Protection Rule was a checklist of clear guidance, clear guardrails as to what was and was not federally regulated. Now we're about, if this rule is put into place as is, we're about to enter a period in time where, once again, the determination of one individual could require a federal permit, and that's not a good place to be. Farmers need certainty.
What can farmers do?
Right now, farmers need to know what's on their land and help us to continue to understand how these land features are important to them and how little water actually flows through these land features on a normal basis. And stay tuned. The rulemaking process is long and arduous, but the best thing that farmers and ranchers can do right now is continue to hold conversations with their elected officials, regardless of party, to let them know that we know the current rule proposed by the Biden administration on water is a far cry from where it needs to be, and there's likely going to be an ask of future legislators to help find some common ground, because right now the proposal put out by EPA and the Army Corps is not common ground.
Infrastructure is another issue that we've discussed a lot. A bill passed earlier this year on infrastructure. Will this help farmers?
Farming is a business that requires a lot of inputs, and in order to get those inputs, we need good ports. We need bridges, we need roads, we need locks and dams to get those inputs. But we also need a mechanism to get our outputs, our commodities, back to market, wherever they're going. So infrastructure has long been vitally important and continues to be important. But one of the more recent variables in the infrastructure conversation is rural broadband, internet connectivity, reliable, high-speed internet connectivity. If anything, the pandemic taught us that without reliable internet connectivity, rural America is left behind. Education, healthcare, doing business. More and more is done online, partially or entirely. And precision agriculture requires that connectivity, both in the hardwired form as well as wireless. And it's not one or the other, it's both. And the more advances we see in precision agriculture, farm technology, the more reliant that is on reliable high-speed internet in rural areas. The bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed the House and Senate and is signed by the president, makes significant investments in the traditional hard infrastructure that we have talked about for decades: roads, bridges, ports, locks, dams, but also providing mechanisms for the Federal Communications Commission, USDA Rural Development, and others to help with that last mile connection of reliable high-speed internet in rural America. It's vital and we need it.
One last thing, we've heard a lot about climate and policies that are coming down. How is Farm Bureau involved in the climate discussion, and how are they working to protect farmers in this?
Climate is one of the main priorities of the current administration, but it's been a congressional talking point for years and years. And over the course of the last year, Farm Bureau and other organizations got together and put together a coalition called the Food and Agriculture Climate Alliance. And through that alliance, we've found multiple areas of agreement between agriculture organizations, commodity groups, food and agribusiness companies, and environmental interests as well. And what we've done is decided to agree on what we can agree on and not focus on the areas where we disagree. And we put forth a group of 40 priorities, 40 policy recommendations that either party can take if they want to do something in the name of climate change or just plain old environmental sustainability. Actions that they can take. First and foremost, our recommendations are that any actions on environmental sustainability need to also make sure that it's economically sustainable for the farm or for the ranch. Farmers and ranchers have long been the first environmentalists. We care for the soil, we care for the land. Shame on us if we don't. It's in our best interest to make sure that, and many farmers take it personally, to leave the land in better shape for their kids than they received it, and that's happening with each and every generation. We're engaged in the conversation when it comes to climate. Climate is a major priority for this administration, and we're making sure that the decisions they make are not done in a vacuum. What we're stressing is that anything on environmental sustainability or conservation programs be market-based incentives, voluntary implementation at the farm level, because a one-size-fits-all approach does not work in agriculture, particularly, but especially when it comes to conservation practices. What makes sense here in Iowa is not necessarily the best solution for Idaho or South Carolina or Vermont. So a one-size-fits-all approach is certainly not the way to do it. Working in a voluntary mechanism is how you get buy-in from the agriculture community. And we also want to make sure that anything done in the name of environmental sustainability be focused on working lands, allowing farmers to continue to grow and not setting aside land that we're going to need to produce food, fiber, and fuel.
Well, those are some pretty significant issues on the horizon, but that's exactly why you have a group like Farm Bureau channeling your stories and grassroots input and advocating for you when you can't be there to do it for yourself. We've been doing it for 103 years, and we're ready to do it again in 2022. That's all for this episode of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it and that you'll join us for our next one on January 10th. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau, and thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.